Most people believe they don't reach their potential because of lack of opportunity, lack of time, lack of resources. But that's not the real reason. Not even close. The real reason is much harder to accept. Most people never reach their potential because they never fully commit to anything. Think about that. Not trying once, not starting something, but fully committing, staying with it. When it gets boring, when it gets difficult, when it stops being exciting, that's where people fall off. Because potential is not unlocked in moments of motivation. It's built in moments of resistance. And most people avoid those moments. Now ask yourself something honestly. How many things have you started, but never finished? How many ideas felt exciting at the beginning, but slowly disappeared? That's not lack of ability. That's lack of consistency. And consistency is uncomfortable because it requires doing something, even when you don't feel like it, even when there's no reward yet, even when nobody is watching. And that's where most people stop, because they rely on feeling. They wait to feel motivated. They wait to feel ready. But those feelings are not reliable. They come and go. And when they go, so does the effort. Now here's something deeper. People don't just avoid hard work. They avoid uncertainty. Because reaching your potential requires stepping into something unknown. There's no guarantee, no clear path, no immediate result. And that creates doubt. What if it doesn't work? What if I waste time? What if I fail? So instead of moving forward, they stay where they are. Not because they can't do more, but because staying feels safer. Now think about this. Your potential is not something fixed. It's not something you either have or don't have. It's something that develops based on what you do repeatedly. So if your actions stay small, your potential stays small. If your actions stay safe, your results stay safe. And safe is the enemy of growth. Now let's go deeper. Most people overestimate what they can do in a short time and underestimate what they can do long term. So when they don't see quick results, they stop. They lose patience. They move on to something else. And they repeat that pattern again and again and again, never staying long enough to actually grow. Now ask yourself this. What if the reason you haven't reached your potential is not because you're missing something, but because you keep stopping, because you keep switching, because you keep restarting? Every time it gets hard, every time it gets uncomfortable, that's not progress. That's resetting. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people are not far from their potential. They're just inconsistent. They get close, then they stop. They build momentum, then they lose it. And over time, that creates a pattern of almost successful, almost disciplined, almost focused, but never fully there. Now think about how frustrating that is. Not failing completely, but never reaching what you're capable of, because you never pushed far enough. Now let me ask you something direct. Are you actually lacking ability? Or are you just not applying it consistently? Because those are two completely different problems. And most people confuse them. They think they need more knowledge, more information, more preparation. But what they actually need is more execution, more repetition, more discipline. Now here's the key. Your potential is not something you discover. It's something you build. Through action, through effort, through consistency. And if you're not willing to stay consistent, especially when it gets hard, you will never see what you're capable of. Not because it's not there, but because you never gave it enough time to develop. Let's be honest for a moment. Most people don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they stop too early. Way too early. Right at the moment, where things start getting real. At the beginning, everything feels exciting. New idea, new plan, new energy. You feel motivated, focused, driven. But that phase never lasts. And that's where the difference happens. Because once the excitement fades, you're left with something else. Repetition, boredom, resistance. And most people are not built for that. Or better said, they never train themselves for that. Now think about this. Why do people jump from one thing to another? New goals, new plans, new ideas. Because starting feels good. It gives you a sense of progress, without requiring real commitment. But finishing, that's different. Finishing requires you to stay, when it's no longer exciting, when it's just work, when there's no validation, when nobody cares. That's where potential is built. But that's also where most people leave. Now let me ask you something directly. How many times did you get close to something and then stopped? Not because you couldn't continue, but because it got harder? Because it got repetitive? Because it stopped feeling rewarding? That's the exact moment where most people lose. And it's not because they lack ability. It's because they lack tolerance for discomfort. Now here's something deeper. People say they want success, but what they actually want is the feeling of success, not the process. Because the process is not attractive. It's not exciting. It's not glamorous. It's quiet, repetitive, sometimes frustrating. And that's where discipline comes in. Not motivation. Discipline. Doing what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel. Now think about this. If you only act when you feel like it, how often will you actually move forward? Not much. Because feelings change constantly. They are unstable. They are unreliable. And building anything meaningful requires stability, consistency, structure. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people are addicted to comfort. Even when they say they want more, they want growth. Without discomfort, they want results. Without effort, they want change. Without changing their behavior. That doesn't work. It never has. Now let's go even deeper. You don't just stop because it's hard. You stop because you start doubting. Doubting yourself. Doubting the process. Doubting the outcome. And doubt kills momentum. Because once you start questioning everything, you slow down. You hesitate. You lose direction. And that hesitation is enough to break progress. Now think about this. What if you removed doubt and just kept going? Same actions, same direction, same consistency. Where would you be? Most people never find out because they stop too soon. Now here's something important. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to keep moving. Even slowly, even imperfectly, but consistently. Now let me ask you something honestly. Are you actually pushing your limits? Or are you stopping at the first sign of resistance? Because your potential starts exactly where your comfort ends. And if you never go past that point, you will never see it. Not because it's not there, but because you never reached it. Here's something you probably won't like hearing. You already know what to do. You've known it for a while. That next step, that move, that thing you keep thinking about, but never actually execute. It's not a mystery. It's not hidden. It's right there. So why aren't you doing it? Not in theory, in reality. Because this is where most people lie to themselves. They say, I need more time. I need to learn more. I need to prepare. But let's be honest. If it was truly important, you would have started already. That's the truth. Now think about this. How many hours have you spent thinking about changing something, compared to actually doing it? Thinking feels productive. It gives you the illusion of movement. But it's not movement. It's delay. And delay is what keeps you exactly where you are. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. You are not stuck. You are choosing not to move. Not once, but repeatedly. Every time you avoid that step. Every time you say later. Every time you do something easier instead. You reinforce that choice. And over time, that becomes your identity. Someone who thinks, but doesn't execute. Now let that sink in. Because that's the difference between people who reach their potential and people who don't. Not intelligence, not talent, execution. Now let me ask you something directly. If someone followed your exact habits, your exact decisions, your exact level of effort for the next 5 years, would they reach something meaningful? Or would they stay exactly where they are? Because that answer is your future, not your intentions, your behavior. Now here's something deeper. You don't just avoid action. You replace it with easier things. Scrolling, watching, planning, talking, all things that feel active, but don't actually move you forward. And that's dangerous, because it keeps you busy, without progress. Now think about this. How often are you actually doing something difficult that moves your life forward? Not something comfortable, not something routine, something challenging, something that requires effort. Most people can't answer that clearly, because those moments are rare. Now here's the truth. Your potential is built in those moments. Not in easy ones, not in comfortable ones, in difficult ones, in the moments you want to stop, but don't. That's where growth happens. That's where change happens. But that's also where most people leave. Now let me ask you something honestly. When things get hard, what do? Do you push through? Or do you step back? Do you stay consistent? Or do you slow down? Because that pattern defines everything. Now here's the uncomfortable part. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more inspiration. You need to stop avoiding effort. That's it. Because effort is the gate. And most people never go through it. They stand in front of it, thinking about it, talking about it, but never stepping through. Now imagine this. What if you just did what you already know you should do? Consistently, without overthinking, without waiting for the right moment? Where would you be? You don't know, because you've never done it long enough. And that's the problem. Not lack of ability, lack of sustained action. Now here's the final question for this part. Are you actually trying? Or are you just staying busy? Because those are not the same. And deep down, you already know the answer. Let's remove every excuse for a moment. No more "I don't have time." No more "I'm not ready." No more "I need to figure things out first." Just the truth. You are exactly where your habits have placed you. Not your intentions, not your plans. Your habits. What you do every day, repeatedly. That's your real direction. Now think about your day. Not what you wish it looked like. What it actually looks like. Where does your time go? Where does your energy go? Where does your focus go? Because wherever those go, that's what you're building. And if you're honest, most of it is not going toward your potential. It's going toward maintenance, comfort, distraction. Now here's the uncomfortable part. You don't rise to your potential. You fall to your habits. Every time. Because potential is something you reach. Only if your actions support it. And most people's actions don't. Now let me ask you something directly. What do your habits say about you? Not your goals, not your dreams. Your habits. Do they reflect someone who is building something? Or someone who is just staying occupied? Because habits don't lie. They show the truth. Now here's something deeper. You don't fail in big moments. You fail in small decisions. Repeated daily. Choosing the easier option. Choosing comfort. Choosing distraction. Again and again. And over time, those small choices create a big result. A result that looks like, I never reached my potential. But the truth is, you built that result. Step by step. Now think about this. If you changed just a few key habits, and stayed consistent with them, for months, for years, how different would your life look? Completely different. But you don't do it. Why? Because habits require discipline. And discipline is uncomfortable. Now let's go even deeper. People don't lack knowledge. They lack control. Control over their actions. Control over their impulses. Control over their consistency. Because knowing what to do is easy. Doing it repeatedly is hard. Now here's the reality. Every time you break your own commitment, you weaken your trust in yourself. Every time you say, I'll do it, and don't, you send a signal to your mind that your words don't matter, that your decisions don't hold. And over time, that destroys confidence. Not because you failed, but because you stopped trusting yourself. Now think about how serious that is. You don't believe in your ability, not because you can't do things, but because you haven't proven to yourself that you will. Now let me ask you something honestly. Do you trust yourself to follow through? Not when it's easy, when it's hard, when you don't feel like it, when there's no reward, because that's what matters. Now here's the key. People who reach their potential are not different. They don't have something special. They just do what they said they would do. Consistently. That's it. No magic. No secret. Just execution. Now compare that to most people. They plan. They think. They talk. But they don't execute. Or they execute for a short time, and then stop. And stopping is what kills everything. Not failure. Stopping. Now here's the truth. You don't need a new plan. You don't need new ideas. You need to stop breaking your own patterns. Because every time you stop, you go back. And going back is what keeps you in the same place. Now ask yourself this. If you did the right things, consistently, without stopping, how far could you go? You don't know, because you've never tested it. And that is why most people never reach their potential. Not because they can't, but because they never stay long enough to find out. Not people in general. You. Because at this point, you already know if this applies to you. You feel it. That moment while listening where you think, yeah, that's true. And right after that, another thought comes in. I'll fix it. I'll start soon. I just need to get things together. But let's be honest. How long have you been telling yourself that? Be real. Weeks? Months? Years? Because that pattern, that I'll start soon, that's exactly what keeps you in the same place. It feels like progress. It feels like intention. But it's not. It's delay. Now think about this. How many times did you promise yourself something and didn't follow through? Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't. Because it got uncomfortable. Because it required effort. Because it wasn't easy. And every time that happens, you lose something. Not externally. Internally. You lose trust in yourself. Now let me ask you something directly. When you say you're going to do something, do you actually believe it? Or is it just something you say to feel better in the moment? Because if your actions don't follow your words mean nothing, and your mind knows that. Now here's something deeper. You are watching your own life happen, not building it. Watching it, day by day, thinking about what you could do, what you should do, what you might do, but not actually doing it. And that gap between knowing and doing, that's where your potential disappears. Not in failure, in inaction. Now think about this. You don't need more time. You've had time. You don't need more ideas. You already have them. You don't need more motivation. You felt it before. What you need is to stop avoiding action. That's it. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. You are capable of more than you're currently doing. You know it. I know it. That's not the problem. The problem is, you're not applying it consistently. Now ask yourself honestly, if someone else had your exact ability, your exact resources, your exact opportunities, but they executed every day while you hesitated, who would get further? The answer is obvious. And that's what makes it uncomfortable. Because it's not about what you have. It's about what you do with it. Now here's something that hits harder. You don't lose your potential in one moment. You lose it slowly. Every time you choose not to act. Every time you delay. Every time you avoid. And over time, those small moments add up until one day, you look back and realize how much you left unused. Not because you couldn't, but because you didn't. Now let that sink in. Because that's the difference between people who reach their potential and people who don't. Not talent, not intelligence. Action. Consistent action. Now here's the final question for you. Are you actually trying to reach your potential? Or are you just thinking about it? Because those are two completely different things. And deep down, you already know which one you're doing. At this point, there's nothing new to understand. You already see it. You already know it. So let's stop pretending this is about information. It's not. It's about what you do next. Because everything you've heard comes down to one simple reality. You are either moving forward, or you're staying exactly where you are. There is no in between, no neutral, no pause. Because even when you do nothing, you're still choosing something. You're choosing to stay the same. Now think about this. Right now, as you're listening, your life is still moving. Time is still passing. Opportunities are still passing. And nothing is waiting for you to feel ready. Nothing. Now here's the truth most people avoid. You don't suddenly become someone who reaches their potential. You become that person through repeated actions. Daily. Consistent. Uncomfortable actions. And if those actions are not there, nothing changes. Not your situation. Not your results. Not your life. Now let's make it very clear. Your potential is not hiding somewhere. It's not waiting to be discovered. It's waiting to be built. Through what you do. Not what you think. Not what you plan. What you do. Now ask yourself something honestly. If you continue exactly like this, same habits, same effort, same decisions, where will you be in 5 years? Not where you hope, where you're actually heading. Because your direction is already set by your current behavior. Now here's the uncomfortable part. You don't need more time to change that. You need a different standard, a higher one. Because right now, your standard allows you to stop, allows you to delay, allows you to break your own commitments. And as long as that's allowed, nothing changes. Now think about this. What would happen if you stopped negotiating with yourself? If you decided something and actually followed through, every time, no excuses, no delays, no later, just action, your life would change. Not slowly, immediately, because direction would change. And direction is everything. Now here's the final truth. You are not missing potential. You are missing execution. And execution is a choice, not a talent, not a gift, a choice. Repeated daily. Now everything comes down to this. Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now, do you keep doing what you've been doing and accept where it leads? Or do you change your actions and accept where that takes you? Because both paths are clear, both outcomes are predictable, and both are your responsibility, no one else's. Now there's no more confusion, no more excuses, no more waiting. You know exactly what's happening, and now, you decide if it stays that way.